At my father's funeral, my selfish husband laughed and said, "This was part of my plan. I now control the $50 million company." It was shocking to see him drinking coffee so carelessly. I told him to stop, but he got angry and threw divorce papers at me, saying, "My plan is complete." Then he stood up and spilled hot coffee on me before leaving. Filled with a desire for revenge, I decided to take action. Within a few weeks, he ended up working a low-paying job at a gas station. My name is Sarah Morgan, and I want to share my journey. A journey marked by unexpected challenges, betrayal, and the resilience it took to reclaim my life and my legacy. I was born and raised in Chicago, a city bustling with dreams and ambitions, and I always knew I was meant to follow in my father's footsteps. He founded Titan Motors, a company specializing in heavy bike spare parts. Growing up, I spent countless hours in the factory, absorbing everything I could about the business. When my father passed away unexpectedly, I was only 31. I was devastated. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Titan Motors was worth $130 million, and I found myself thrust into the role of president at such a young age, overwhelmed by the responsibility that came with it. I had never imagined taking over so soon, especially without my father by my side to guide me. In those early days, I struggled to keep the company afloat. My father's friend, Victor Gray, stepped in to help. Victor was a seasoned businessman, the owner of Velocity Cycles, a sports cycle manufacturing company worth $50 million. He took me under his wing, teaching me the ins and outs of management. His guidance was invaluable, and I quickly grew to respect him as both a mentor and a father figure. "Sarah, you have what it takes to lead this company," he often told me. "Just believe in yourself." His words encouraged me to push through the sleepless nights and mounting pressures. Victor introduced me to his son, Mark Gray, shortly after my father's funeral. Mark was charming, a few years older than me at 35, and he managed a branch of Velocity Cycles. He seemed supportive and sincere, always encouraging me as I navigated my new responsibilities. I felt a spark between us, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Within a year, Mark and I were married. Initially, I thought I had made a great choice. He was attentive and kind, often reminding me of the importance of family and commitment. "We're in this together, Sarah," he'd say, taking my hand. I believed he truly wanted what was best for me and for Titan Motors. But as the months passed, a darker side of Mark began to emerge. After we got married, I started to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He would belittle Titan Motors, calling it a small-town factory. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from his job. But the more he belittled my work, the more I felt my self-esteem eroding. "You really should consider quitting, Sarah," he said one morning over breakfast. "Your company can't compete with Velocity. You don't want people to think I can't support you, do you?" His words stung, but I tried to be understanding. "Mark, Titan Motors is my family's legacy. I can't just walk away from it." He rolled his eyes, his demeanor shifting to one of disdain. "Come on, Sarah. Your father would want you to be happy, not to struggle with a failing business." I began to feel trapped, suffocated by his arrogance. I couldn't believe that the man I loved could think so little of my work. Despite my heartache, I continued to focus on Titan Motors. Victor remained a steadfast ally, and with his help, we were slowly turning things around. But everything changed when Victor suddenly passed away. The day of his funeral, I arrived early, still in shock from the news. As I stood at the entrance, I noticed Mark casually sipping coffee, seemingly unaffected by the somber atmosphere surrounding us. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Mark, can you at least pretend to care?" I whispered, my voice quivering. He looked at me, confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" "It's just a funeral, Sarah." I couldn't believe his response. As I confronted him further, he merely laughed. "You really don't understand, do you? Marrying you was just part of my plan to secure my father's company. Now that he's gone, I have complete control." My heart dropped. It was a revelation that shattered me. "What do you mean?" I stammered, tears welling in my eyes. "You can't be serious." Mark's expression hardened, and he threw divorce papers at me, a cruel smile spreading across his face. It's over. I'm done. You're no longer needed now that I have everything I want. Mark, I yelled, desperation flooding my voice. How can you do this? After everything we've been through? In a fit of rage, he threw his coffee at me, the hot liquid splattering against my blouse. I gasped in shock, the sting of betrayal burning deeper than the coffee on my skin. You'll regret this, Sarah, he shouted, storming off, leaving me standing there, humiliated and heartbroken. In that moment, everything changed. The love I thought we shared was revealed to be a facade, and I was left with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I vowed then to take back my life, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and to ensure that Titan Motors would not fall into the hands of a man who cared only for himself. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a battle that would test my resilience and determination like never before. After Mark walked out on me, I felt a mix of anger and determination swirling inside. I knew I had to act quickly. The pain of betrayal was fresh, but it also ignited a fire within me. Titan Motors was my family's legacy, and I wasn't going to let it be tarnished by someone who didn't care about its future. I took a deep breath and began to formulate a plan. First, I needed to consult with my legal team. I called my attorney, Lisa, who had been with my family for years. Sarah, I'm so sorry to hear about Victor and everything that's happened with Mark, she said empathetically. Let's get together and discuss your options. The meeting took place the next day. I sat in her office, my palms sweaty with anxiety. I need to terminate all business dealings with Velocity Cycles, I stated firmly, looking her in the eye. Their contracts represent a significant portion of our revenue, and I can't let Mark leverage them against me. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. You're aware that this will impact Velocity's financial stability. Are you prepared for the consequences? Absolutely, I replied, feeling the weight of my words. He's made it clear that he doesn't respect me or my work. I need to show him that I'm not to be underestimated. With that, we began drafting the necessary documents to terminate the contracts. As I signed the papers, I felt a strange mix of sadness and empowerment. I was cutting ties with the man I once loved, but it was necessary for my future and the future of Titan Motors. Once the contracts were terminated, the effects were immediate. News spread quickly through the industry that Titan Motors was no longer affiliated with Velocity Cycles. I watched as Mark's company began to crumble. Clients, fearing instability, started pulling their orders. The revenue he had relied upon began to dry up, and with it, his confidence. At the factory, I felt a sense of urgency as employees sensed the changing tides. I called a meeting to reassure everyone. I know things are tough right now, I began, looking into the eyes of my team. But we're going to come through this stronger than ever. We have the opportunity to forge new partnerships and explore new markets. My words were met with nods and murmurs of encouragement. I could feel their loyalty and determination, which fueled my resolve. Together, we worked tirelessly to expand our client base, focusing on building relationships with new companies. I immersed myself in networking events, showcasing our products and capabilities. The more I put myself out there, the more I realized the strength of Titan Motors wasn't just in our products but in our people. As weeks turned into months, I started to hear about the state of Velocity Cycles. Their financial troubles were mounting, and Mark was struggling to maintain control. I felt a pang of satisfaction knowing that my decision had significant consequences, but I also worried about the people who worked for him. They were not responsible for his actions, and I couldn't help but think of Victor, who would have never wanted this. One evening, as I was reviewing contracts in my office, I received a call from an old acquaintance, Jonathan, who managed a major bike retailer. Sarah, I've been hearing great things about Titan Motors, he said. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership. Your reputation is growing, and I think we could do some amazing things together. His words filled me with hope. Absolutely, Jonathan. I'd love to meet and discuss how we can work together, I replied, excitement bubbling in my chest. As I hung up the phone, I realized that despite the darkness surrounding my personal life, opportunities were arising for my company. I threw myself into this partnership, working closely with Jonathan to launch a new line of products. With every success, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the image of Mark's cold demeanor during our last encounter. I'd heard rumors about how he was handling the situation at Velocity. Employees were leaving, and his arrogance had turned to desperation. I kept my focus on Titan Motors, but the thought of his decline lingered in the back of my mind. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing financial reports, I received an unexpected visitor. It was one of Mark's former employees, Jessica. She looked distraught as she stepped into my office. "I'm sorry to just show up like this, Sarah," she said, her voice trembling. "I felt I had to tell you what's happening at Velocity. Mark is in way over his head." I listened intently as she shared stories of Mark's mismanagement and how he had neglected to pay his employees. "It's bad, Sarah. People are struggling. I just didn't want you to think he was getting away with it," she said, tears in her eyes. I felt a mix of empathy and resolve. This wasn't just about my revenge. It was about the people affected by Mark's choices. I thanked Jessica for her courage in speaking out and promised to keep her information confidential. As the sun set that evening, I knew I had to continue pushing forward. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but I was more determined than ever to protect my family's legacy and build a future I could be proud of. Little did I know, the battle was far from over, and the ultimate confrontation with Mark was still to come. As the weeks passed, I continued to build momentum at Titan Motors. Our new partnership with Jonathan was thriving, and we were rolling out innovative products that were receiving positive feedback in the market. The factory buzzed with energy, and I felt more confident in my role than ever before. However, I couldn't ignore the reality of what was happening with Velocity Cycles and Mark. Every now and then, I'd hear whispers about Mark's escalating desperation. I learned that he was missing payments to suppliers, and employees were leaving in droves. One afternoon, during a meeting with my team, one of my managers mentioned a rumor they'd heard. "It's bad over at Velocity." I heard they're down to half their staff, and Mark's refusing to acknowledge the problem. I took a deep breath. "I can't let this affect us. We need to stay focused on what we're doing here," I urged, though a small part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern for those who were caught in the middle of Mark's mismanagement. Then, one rainy Thursday, I received a call that would change everything. It was Lisa, my attorney. "Sarah, I think you need to be aware of something important," she began. "Mark has filed for bankruptcy." My heart raced. "What does that mean for Titan Motors?" I asked, a mix of anxiety and curiosity flooding through me. "Well, it means he's looking to dissolve Velocity Cycles. But it could also mean he'll try to reclaim some of the debts he owes by going after Titan Motors," she explained. "We should prepare ourselves in case he tries to pull anything." "Is there any way he can do that?" I asked, fear creeping in. I had worked so hard to secure our company's future, and I wouldn't let Mark ruin that. "It's unlikely he would succeed, but we need to be vigilant," Lisa replied. "I recommend tightening up our contracts and preparing for any legal challenges." I spent the rest of the day in a daze, my mind racing with thoughts of Mark's next move. The once proud branch manager was now a desperate man looking for a way to save himself. I wondered how far he would go. A few days later, I learned just how far he was willing to sink. As I walked into the factory, I overheard a conversation between two employees. "Did you hear? Mark is claiming Titan Motors sabotaged Velocity's contracts. He's trying to pin the blame on Sarah," one of them said, disbelief etched on their face. I felt the blood drain from my face. "This is outrageous," I whispered to myself. I couldn't believe that after everything, Mark would still try to drag my name through the mud. It was as if he hadn't learned a thing. That evening, I sat down with Lisa to discuss my options. "He's trying to tarnish my reputation," I said, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I won't let him get away with this." "We need to gather evidence of his mismanagement," Lisa suggested. "If you can show that his claims are baseless, it will only strengthen your position in court." Fueled by determination, I spent the next few weeks collecting everything I could: emails, reports, testimonials from former employees like Jessica. I knew the truth was on my side, and I was prepared to fight back. But as the legal battle loomed, I felt a sense of dread. It was hard to believe that the man I once loved had turned into a bitter adversary, willing to do anything to save his own skin. I wondered if he was still the charming person I had married, or if that man had vanished along with the life we had built together. Then, just when I thought I had everything under control, I received another phone call. It was Mark. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice cold and distant. I hesitated, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired. What could we possibly have to discuss? I replied, my heart pounding. "I think we can come to an agreement," he said, the arrogance returning to his tone. "Let's meet. There's still a way out of this for both of us." I didn't know what to expect from our meeting, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Mark dictate my future any longer. I agreed to meet him, steeling myself for what was to come. The final confrontation was looming, and I was ready to face whatever he had planned. The day of my meeting with Mark arrived, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I arrived at a small cafe on the outskirts of Chicago, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our past hanging over us. As I stepped inside, I spotted him sitting at a table, his expression unreadable. He looked worn, his usual arrogance replaced by a shadow of desperation. "Sarah," he greeted me, his voice lacking the charm it once held. "Mark," I replied coolly, taking a seat across from him. I could sense the tension in the air, a charged silence that spoke volumes about the animosity that had built up between us. "I appreciate you coming," he began, rubbing the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "I know things have been rough. I just want to talk about what's next." I leaned forward, ready to defend my position. "What do you mean by what's next? You're the one who filed for bankruptcy, not me. You've tried to blame me for your failures." He sighed, frustration etched on his face. "I never wanted it to come to this. I thought we could find a way to save both our companies. I'm willing to negotiate." "Negotiate? After everything you've done? You think I would just roll over after you tried to ruin my reputation?" I shot back, feeling the anger boil within me. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice rising slightly. "But you know how it is in business." I was desperate enough to throw coffee in my face at my father's funeral. I reminded him sharply, "You've shown your true colors, Mark. You're not the man I thought I married." His facade cracked for a moment, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "I know I messed up. I let my father's legacy blind me. But I'm asking for a chance to fix this. We could work together, Sarah." I stared at him, weighing his words. Could I really trust him after everything? And why should I believe you now? What assurance do I have that this isn't just another manipulation? He hesitated, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "I can offer you a settlement," he said finally. "I'll drop the claims against Titan Motors if you help me secure a new partnership to save Velocity." I leaned back in my chair, contemplating his proposal. On one hand, this was an opportunity to help the employees who had suffered under his leadership. On the other hand, could I really risk my company's future by aligning myself with him again? "Mark, you've caused too much damage. The people who worked for you deserve better than your reckless decisions," I replied firmly. "I won't be a part of saving a company that has shown such disregard for its employees." His shoulders slumped, and I saw a flicker of the man I once knew. "I've lost everything, Sarah. I didn't realize how much I needed you until it was too late." My heart softened for a moment, remembering the good times we shared. But the betrayal ran too deep. "You brought this on yourself. I won't let your failures drag Titan Motors down with you." With that, I stood up, ready to leave. "This meeting is over. You need to take responsibility for your actions, and I will not be part of your downfall." As I walked away, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was finally breaking free from the chains of our past. I knew I had made the right choice for myself and for Titan Motors. My company was thriving, and I had worked too hard to let someone like Mark undermine my achievements. In the weeks that followed, Velocity Cycles officially filed for bankruptcy, a reflection of Mark's mismanagement. I received messages from former employees who were grateful for my leadership and support during the transition. They were eager to join Titan Motors, where they could build a future based on hard work and respect. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing new contracts, I glanced out the window at the bustling city below. I had overcome so much and emerged stronger than ever. Titan Motors was not just a company, it was my father's legacy, and I was determined to protect it. As for Mark, I heard he had taken a job at a local gas station, struggling to make ends meet. Part of me felt a pang of sympathy, but I knew that this was the consequence of his choices. I had reclaimed my dignity and my legacy, proving that strength and resilience can rise above deceit. I closed my eyes, letting the moment wash over me. I was ready to embrace the future, one filled with hope, opportunity, and the unwavering spirit to keep moving forward.